Ben Shapiro has debunked transgender ideology. Well, that's pretty impressive, Ben. Do you have any academic papers to submit? Oh, I see. Debunked is a segment they do. I see. To see more episodes of Debunked. Okay, gotcha. All right, let's go. The baby.
You are about to watch an episode of my awesome new series, Debunk. If I do say so myself. Seriously, we are promo code Debunk for binge the entire first season peak.
Oh, thank God. We had 30 seconds fewer that we had to watch.
Today on Debunked, we're going to discuss a very common question. Can a man be a woman?
Well. All right. We're putting on our good faith goggles. We're going to try to let him make his argument before we respond to it.
Dr. Levine, do you believe that minors are capable of making such a life-changing decision as changing one's sex?
Well, Senator, thank you for your interest in this question. Transgender medicine is a very complex and nuanced field.
The specific question was about minors. Let's be a little more specific since you evaded the question. Do you support...
She was talking for like 2 seconds there. How? I'm pretty sure you have more time to talk. Okay. I think she was responding there, but okay.
The government intervening to override the parent's consent to give a child puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and/or amputation surgery of breasts and genitalia.
So I can just say right off the bat, this is a bad faith question because it misframes the fundamental argument. So the government already has limited rights to allow a child to pursue medically necessary treatment, even if the parents disallow it. It's complicated. It depends on the circumstances, but yeah, that does have. For example, like if a kid gets like shot in the chest in like a gang shootout, and they get brought over to a hospital and they're being treated, and a parent shows up and they're like, actually, no, we don't care. Stop it. Stop. The state will actually continue treating that child. There's already a precedent for incidences like this, but yeah.
Senator, transgender medicine is a very complex...
The answer, clearly, is yes.
Wait, hold on. Wait, why are you replaying her first answer? Wait, what? Wait, why would you show her about to answer and then cut her off before she delivers the answer to the provided question? What did she say that you don't want us to hear, Ben? That's a very weird thing to do, Ben. Why would you do that?
As Levine even told a former Trump administration official. Just pause on that for a moment and think about how crazy that is.
We didn't hear the argument given. You just saw the question asked. Why show discourse between two other people? Can we hear it? Can we find the original? It's not even relevant to this video. The fact that Ben Shapiro didn't want it shown already proves that the answer was more nuanced than something he wanted to have presented on his show. Ben Shapiro needs snappy, stupid, easily debunkable positions from progressives because that's his level. Anything a little bit complicated, it goes beyond his ability to straw man or Mott and Bailey. So the fact that he did not show it, she refused to answer because the questions were bad faith. Did she explain that the questions were bad faith or that there was a false premise to begin with? Here's the link. How long is this? 5 minutes? No, she did not. Oh, did she actually give a bad answer?
80 to 95 social sex.
Nuanced field with developed. I would look forward to working with you and your office and coming to your office and discussing the particulars of the standards of care for transgender medicine.
The specific question was about minors. Let's be a little more specific. A minor for Kira Bell, who's a 23-year-old girl who was confused with her identity. She thought, well, maybe that's what I am. She ended up getting these puberty that minors should not have the ability to make the decision, to make a more firm decision on whether or not minors should be. Grows a beard. Do you think she's going to go? changes. They're all being used off-label. I find it ironic that the left that
Wait,
went
where's the
nuts
follow-up
over
answer?
permanent that went nuts a very specific
staff about the and talk. I would certainly and if confirmed to the position. Senator, transgender medicine is a very complex and nuanced field.
Okay, no, she actually does open her responses both times with the same. Okay.
And if confirmed to the position of Assistant Secretary of Health, I would certainly be pleased to come to your office and talk with you and your staff about the standards of care and the complexity of this field.
Let it go into the record that the witness refused to answer the question. The question is.
Oh, wow. Actually, Ben's right. This is a terrible answer. She actually completely dodged the question. No, that's that. No, okay. All right, that's 0.1 to Ben there. No, she dodged it. She did not answer the question. What question? The question was on young people receiving transgender care or whatever. But she didn't answer it in both cases. Yeah, 1 point to Ben. All right, fair point. It's a shitty answer. Now, I could have answered the question that was levied at her. Answer it for anyone watching. I think I just kind of did, but the initial premise is false. The answer is pretty simple. The conservative narrative here is that children are making these decisions on their own, but in reality, any time there's even a chance of a child receiving even the potential for gender-affirming care, it is after significant and extensive and long-term evaluation from pediatric psychiatrists whose job it is to decide what kinds of treatments are best for the child's health and well-being. Because untreated, these conditions, these mental states, can drastically decrease the quality of life for these children and lead to suicide in the long run. And that is why the vast body of existing medical research on the subject suggests there be this standard of care which is provided for children. Something like that. I mean, I would prepare it a little better if I was going to be part of a congressional inquiry, but, you know.
Now, in the past few years, you've heard a lot of statements that sound like we must not raise boys as boys and girls as girls because we just can't be sure that kids actually have the sex assigned to them at birth.
You're leading with the question there a little bit. What does it mean to raise a boy as a boy and raising a girl as a girl? And also, who talks about this? The whole they-bees thing is really uncommon. The idea that that parents are raising their children gender neutral, this is an extremely uncommon thing.
You've heard that some people are men in women's bodies or women in men's bodies. You may even have heard that if you're a straight dude and you don't want to have sex with a trans woman, meaning a biological male, this makes you gay.
I have never heard that in my life. I have never in my life once heard that. I'm sorry, I've never heard that. I'm gonna need something. I'm gonna need something on that one. I have never heard that. Now, I'd argue that if you're a straight guy, it is still straight to have sex with a trans woman, but that you're gay for not? I have never heard that.
All of this is insane, patent nonsense.
Waiting on an argument, Ben.
Males and females reproduce with one another in the human species.
Oh, God. The pseudo-scientific talk. The violin starts strumming. Males and females reproduce in the human species. Oh, God. All right, let's do it. Let's go!
We've known this for quite a while.
Wow.
The simple reality is that the human species is sexually dimorphic. Sex is binary. We come in two.
Wasn't this
that
example...
the human species is sexually dimorphic.
It's interesting that he would show lions here. Didn't Sean provide an example in a video of his of female lions growing giant manes as they assumed the social roles of the tribe that males previously had? Interesting stuff, right? It's just a little interesting when you think about it, you know, a little bit. You might actually call that a trans lion, kind of. Hold on. Female lion with mane. 5 wild lionesses grow a mane and start acting like males. Is this not a trans lion? This is a trans lion. Queen shit. King shit? King shit. I'm canceled.
Sex is binary. We come in two brands, male and female. Typically, those who have the XY chromosomes are male. Those who have XX chromosomes are female.
Did you just say typically, Ben? Preempting the obvious retort, are we? Wonder why he would say that. You say typically. Well, what about atypically?
Males and females differ. They differ in size and shape, and musculature, brain function. As neuroscientist Steven Pinker says,
Steven Pinker. By the way, one of the things that people like Ben Shapiro will do is they'll list off a series of true statements and imply other people disagree with them. I have never met a trans person in my life who didn't believe in sexual dimorphism. I have never spoken to a person who did not believe that males were on average stronger than females. I have never in my life met a person who did not believe there were some brain differences between males and females. I have never in my life seen this. But Ben Shapiro is listing all these characteristics as though trans people or woke gender ideologues disagreed. Well, they don't. I don't know why all this is being listed. The question of transgender people and their rights and roles and what we should do to, address their concerns is one of gender, not sex. But we always go in this litany about sex as though people disagree. It's ridiculous and a huge waste of time. But I bet it makes his audience feel very smart.
differences between the sexes are part of the human condition.
Nope, nobody disagrees with this. Also, what is Steven Pinker's degree in? An experimental psychologist who conducts research in visual cognition, psycholinguistics, and social relations. Okay, the way Ben framed him here, like he was some kind of neuroscientist, not a... Psycholinguistics and social relations falls much closer to sociology than it does biology. But, all right. I mean, this is true. Nobody disagrees with this.
Are part of the human condition. There are certainly people who have anomalous genetic conditions, like Klinefelter syndrome, in which a person has two X chromosomes and a Y chromosome.
I appreciate the fact that conservatives have heard this counter-argument so many times in the past 10 years that they start preempting it in their videos now. What they do is they bring up the counter-arguments and then they continue as though those counter-arguments didn't exist. And the reason he said anomalous genetic conditions is because he's about to say that exception shouldn't define the rule. As though, and we just did this with the Freedom Toons cartoon, you can have a binary distribution with more than two options.
And in whom breast development looks female while male genitalia are present. Overall, disorders of sexual development affect 1 in every 5,000 births.
Well, that's one of the many conditions that can lead a person to be intersex. Again, 1 to 2% of people in America are intersex.
Now, the presence of abnormal development does not mean that sex is a spectrum. To suggest otherwise, it would be the same thing as saying that because one child every few thousand is born with 3 toes, this means that the number of toes in the human being is a spectrum. Or that
Well, actually, Ben, I'm pretty sure biologists would say stuff like, generally, humans have 5 toes, but there is variance within a range of probabilities. Now, in conventional speech, we might say humans have 5 toes, and in conventional speech, we may say there are males and females, but when you're talking science, Ben, you have to be a little more specific. This is one of the problems with lay people like Ben Shapiro, which he certainly is on this issue. Yeah, my brother actually has 6 toes on one of his feet. Or on both of his feet? I forget. This is one of the problems with people like Ben Shapiro, who are laypersons to these types of arguments, trying to appeal to conventional definitions when discussing things with scientific specificity. It just doesn't work, folks.
toes in the human being is a spectrum. Or that a person with 3 toes might actually be a sloth human, a 3-toed sloth human.
What?
All reproduction is rooted in the presence of sexual dimorphism. To pretend otherwise is biologically nonsensical.
Ooh.
That's why, to end a conversation on transgenderism, just
Wait. Human reproduction involves sexual dimorphism. You need the testes and the ovarian tubes and the blah blah. Again, what does this have to do with trans people? I'm legitimately asking because, again, like, who is it? Like, I feel like Ben Shapiro could put out a video saying trans ideology debunked, and it's a 5-minute video of him saying stuff like, a penis isn't a vagina. Pectoral muscles and breasts aren't the same thing. Jaw sizes differ between the sexes. Some people are taller than other people. Like, okay.
just ask for a simple, non-self-referential definition of the terms man and woman.
Wait, but now we're talking gender. You can't wait, Ben. You can't jump from 3.5 minutes of irrelevant and somewhat inaccurate scientific speculation, gallivanting, and then jump to definitional arguments. The terms man and woman, for referring to gender, we're talking now about linguistics.
When I say non-self-referential, I mean you can't say, I feel like a woman, therefore I am a woman. For advocates of biology, the answer for what is woman or what is man is simple. You can look at chromosomes, SRY genes, reproductive systems, verifiable answers to the question.
Okay. So, first of all, that is a social construct. Definitions are socially constructed. Second of all, that's sex. Sex and gender aren't the same thing. You can't critique gender ideology if you don't acknowledge that gender exists. Third of all, you just listed multiple characteristics for defining a person's gender, which you just admitted have variances. So, how does this work exactly? This is a completely... these arguments are so incongruous that they're not even wrong. There's not even a point being made here. Maybe I should let him go a little while longer and see if he builds up to a point, but, I mean, how long are we going to have to wait? Look, here's a chart from the Scientific American. Now, the Scientific American is what we might call a science rag. It's a pretty presentable paper, you know? I mean, I'd say they put out some good stuff. Now, this is a chart they came out with on, and I'm going to read the title of the article that it's attached to, Visualizing Sex as a Spectrum. Infographic reveals the startling complexity of sex determination. See, if you want to make the argument that sex is binary, that means there are two choices. That's it. That's what a binary is. Two, bi, two, bi. But there aren't, are there? See, if we go over here to the left, we see typical biological female. From top to bottom, we talk about the changes that take place over the course of their physical development, conception, birth, puberty, and so on. And as we go from left to right, we move from more feminine to more masculine genetic traits. Typical biological female might exist over here, but if we're looking, say, over here, we have something like Turner syndrome, XX testicular development, or sex development. Differing genital development, variation in hormones like excess male hormones, lower degrees of estrogen, infertility, etc., 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 etc. See, sex is a lot more complicated than people like Ben Shapiro want to make it out to be. Because Ben Shapiro doesn't give a fuck about science. Ben Shapiro has an agenda that he wants to push, an ideological bias that he wants to enforce on reality. And he'll claim that he stands with science, but you'll notice scientists don't appear in conservative videos on gender and sex, do they? No. Political pundits do. Scientists produce graphs like this. Now, this is just one interpretation because, as I've said, sex is a social construct. Where do we draw the line here? where exactly is the male-female line? Is it directly in the middle? Is a person right here in its own category? Does intersex mean that a person can't be male or female? There aren't right answers to these questions. It's subjective. There's no getting around that. You can't debunk woke ideology around your basic misunderstanding of these ideas. Let's let Ben run for a little while, okay? Let's go for it.
For advocates of the position that some biological men are women, or vice versa, there is no standard that can be applied. A man can become a woman or a woman a man at any time without any stable definition of man or woman whatsoever. So according to...
So you'll notice that Ben Shapiro didn't actually provide a counter-argument to that. What he did was he said some things and expected the audience to be intuitively repulsed by it. In reality, the argument made by a lot of trans people is that gender should be described by self-identification because that is the method that produces the most social good. That if you adhere to other definitions, like, say, for example, performativity theory, where it's if you're presenting, if you're outwardly expressing as one gender or another, that can be harmful to people who are in the closet. To say, like, oh, you say you're a woman, but you're not because you're not wearing a dress. I mean, a little odd there. Or you can make an argument that it's all biological. But given the variance in subjectivity in biological identification, and the fact that, frankly, you don't know a person's genomes just by looking at them, you can't actually tell. All you have to do is go on, like, Twitter these days, and you'll find, I swear to God, every person on Twitter these days is completely androgynous. If they walk towards you in the street, do you know? If they wore baggy clothing, do you not need? No, probably not. If you're just working off biology there, what are we doing? Are we, like, fucking taking sperm samples from everyone we use pronouns on? Nah. Most people do this. This is a very functional gender theory. Are you ready for it? Okay? This is the way most people do it. Even Ben Shapiro, as much as he likes to pretend that he doesn't, he does this too. We assume a person's gender based on the presence of obvious signifiers, and if there's any ambiguity, we either hold off and use they and wait for a correction, or if somebody corrects us on a bad assumption, we just use the corrected pronouns. And that's it. That's what most people do. Trans, cis, whatever. That just seems to work for most people, you know? Simple as that. Ben Shapiro has admitted he would do this too, that for social purposes, he would see, like, a trans woman and refer to her as her, because the alternative would be pointing at somebody who looks like a woman and saying, excuse me, can you go get him for me? And then the person Ben's talking to is like, who? What? And Ben, the biological male over. I understand the way that he's wearing his hair right now may suggest to you that that is actually an XX individual, but I assure you, if you go over there and you do a DNA test on that person's blood, you will find it, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think you can actually know a person's sex by their blood. But anyway, yeah. It's very dumb.
To our pseudo-medical activists, gender identity is completely separate from sex. The separation between gender and sex relies on a simple fallacy. That gender is entirely socially constructed and thus separate from biology.
No, it doesn't actually at all. Not even slightly. There are many gendered characteristics that are derivative of biology, but that doesn't mean that they aren't separate things. That's not a contradiction, like, even slightly. For example, masculine and feminine can sometimes refer to gender or to biological characteristics. You can say that a person is masculine because of a big beard, which is like a sex male characteristic, or you can say a person is masculine because they're, I don't know, rocking a giant pompadour, which, I mean, anyone can do, you know, because of their walk, because of the clothing they wear, because of their sick tats, dog. One of those is gendered and one of those is sexual. The interplay here is fairly complicated, but just because the interplay is complicated doesn't mean that gender and sex aren't different things. Do we not have separate words to describe separate ideas that are nonetheless interlinked?
Gender, in this iteration, would be all the various feminine qualities that adhere to womanhood, or the masculine qualities that adhere to being a male.
No. the gender would... You just said the gender is by identification, didn't you? Now why are you saying that it has to do with physical attributes?
According to these folks, gender and sex are completely different. Right? All of those gendered notions of femininity, they're completely separate from being a biological female.
Uh-huh.
This Cartesian
Yeah, have you ever seen a drag queen? Yeah, totally. 100%. Yeah.
notion that you can be a woman in a man's body, a soul in the machine, because your gender is separate from your sex, is utterly unsupportable at any level.
Most people don't really use the term like woman's brain and man's body that much anymore. That's kind of like an older way of presenting these ideas. Also, how does this logically follow exactly? What is the argument he's making? Because gender and sex relate to each other, that means you can't have a person whose gender is incongruent with the sex associated with that gender? That doesn't logically follow. Like, there's not even an argument to debunk or an explanation here. That just does not follow from what he's put forward, you know?
Everyone understands there are some attributes that are generally considered more masculine. Chopping wood.
Okay.
Being dumb.
I'm whizzing with the door open.
Okay.
And I love it.
And some that are considered more feminine. Being caring, being nice, right? These are distinctions that do appear in virtually all cultures.
So, oh God. So one of the ways you can tell that Ben Shapiro is utterly unqualified to make these arguments is that Ben Shapiro isn't distinguishing between masculine and feminine characteristics, which are social and which are biological. Notice how he just said masculine characteristics with a picture of a bodybuilder, like on the screen, and now he's referring to masculinity in regards to the social expectation of, say, stupidity, strength, or self-reliance. But he hasn't distinguished between those two things. What arguments am I supposed to derive from this? Do you guys understand the problem with that? If a person was speaking this ignorantly on any scientific subject, they would be laughed out of discussion in any room of people that have a higher than high school level education. Like, it's frustrating to me personally because it doesn't even give me anything to debunk. If there's no argument, I can't really respond to it. It just does not follow. These arguments do not follow.
Virtually all cultures. Some of that is undoubtedly biologically oriented, and some is undoubtedly social construction.
Oh, okay.
But it is simply ridiculous to suggest that if a boy is effeminate, he's actually a girl.
No.
Or that if a...
Wait. Nobody's saying that. What? He had it for a second. Who says this? Nobody says this.
A girl is masculine, she might actually be a boy.
We don't.
But this is what
that.
gender theorists argue.
No, why? Ben, you just said that gender theorists go by the mode of self-identification to determine one's gender. But now you're saying gender theorists go by how masculine or feminine a person is to determine their gender. These are opposite theories of gender, because one of them is entirely internal and described entirely by a person's psychology, and the other one is described by social and physical attributes. You have simultaneously ascribed opposite ideologies to your opposition here. This is completely absurd. I can't believe Ben gets away with making people think that he's some kind of genius child prodigy, rather than a nasally 40-year-old who has, at best, an 8th grader's understanding of the things he criticizes.
The origins of the gender identity movement lie with a professor of medical psychology at Johns Hopkins in the 1960s. His name was John Money. After twin boys were born...
we're getting this one. We're getting this one, guys. We all know this one. They're getting the John Money story that has nothing to do with modern trans ideology. Let's go!
After botched circumcision destroyed one boy's penis, that boy was raised as a girl. By the time that boy was a teenager, the boy felt extraordinary discomfort because he was biologically male, and his parents told him the truth. Both twins ended up killing themselves in their mid-30s. That didn't stop John Money from founding the Johns Hopkins Gender Identity Clinic in 1965.
That's because the kid wasn't trans. Yeah, that the kid wasn't trans. There's a boy. What you're describing validates my argument. That boy had gender dysphoria. Why do conservatives bring this up? Wow, misgendering and being treated in a way incongruent with your identity led to a person's suicide? I wonder if we can arrive at any conclusions from this. This is unironic. This is being cited as an anti-trans position.
His theory was children could identify as members of the opposite sex, and that radical surgery was the proper solution.
We don't, just to be perfectly clear, guys, in case you were wondering, like, modern trans ideology, to the extent that it exists, is not based off John Money, okay? What conservatives do is they reel to this guy, because this guy did a lot of really shitty things, and they're like, so this is the origin of the gender movement. It would be like, but, like, well, you know what? I can do this too. Hey, Ben Shapiro, you're part of the anti-gender theory movement, right? Do you know what the largest book burning in history of trans medical documentation was? It was done by the Nazis. Your ideological origins can be found in the Third Reich, Ben Shapiro. If you want to look at the beginning of the anti-trans movement, you need look no further than 1930s Germany. Now, modern ideologues like Ben Shapiro carry forth the will of Adolf Hitler as they, like, I could do that if I wanted to. I am equally wrong in this argument as Ben Shapiro is in his current argument here. No, I actually think that what I'm saying right now is truer than what he's saying, yeah.
That inside, these kids were members of the opposite sex in reality, and that surgery would merely make their bodies align with their identity. Money claims that, quote,
oh, by the way, it should be pointed out that for people who actually do have gender dysphoria, yes, that was correct. Yes, true. Plenty of research has found that mental illness and suicide goes down significantly after gender affirming care. So, okay. Yeah. All right, what's this quote? I don't like John Money, by the way. We're not defending John Money. I'm just the premise that transitioning helps trans people is an extremely well accepted one.
Gender identity.
Okay, let's see. The gender identity gate is open at birth for a normal child, no less than for one born with unfinished sexual organs and would stay that way at least a year. Yeah, that's cringe. Good thing. Let me find a quote from Adolf Hitler. Now for a quote from the person who inspired Ben Shapiro. Words build bridges into unexplored regions. If you tell a big enough lie and tell it frequently enough, it'll be believed. It is not truth that matters, but victory. That's a little bit on the nose, considering what Ben Shapiro is doing at the moment, lying non-stop because he's paid by billionaires. You know, you tell a lie long enough, people start to believe it.
The gate is open at birth for a normal child, no less than for one born with unfinished.
That's not Hitler, that's like Goebbels. I just Googled Hitler quote. I don't have Hitler quotes on hand.
Sex organs, and would stay that way for at least a year. So in other words, you could have a full biological boy with finished sex organs, and his gender identity was still open. Brains and bodies were considered.
Hey, Ben Shapiro fans, if Ben Shapiro is so confident in his debunking of trans ideology, which we're more than halfway through the video and we haven't gotten it yet, why is he citing quotes from a person nobody cites or uses research for anymore? Like, just out of curiosity, right? Like, imagine if somebody was going out there to debunk the round earth and they started citing, like, 11th century scientists and physicists, you know, like, yes, Newton Callawak from England, 1136, deduced that the world must be a sphere because of the orientation of the salmon as it climbs up the waterfall to meet with its mating partners upriver. Obviously, well, If you take a look at the research, this does not prove the existence of a spherical Earth. These calculations are absurd, frankly, and that's why the Earth is flat. Like, we not maybe use more modern research? Maybe any of the dozens of studies that affirm the idea that gender therapy is helpful to trans people, or
considered in direct opposition, completely separate from one another. Radical feminists like Judith Butler began arguing that all gender was socially constructed.
Another person who wrote in the 1960s. Just crazy, man. Just all these 50 to 60-year-old theorists. Also, Judith Butler wasn't a biologist.
And that therefore, all inequalities in outcome between men and women could be laid at the feet of an evil, sexist society.
Yeah.
If gender is a meaningless social construct created by society, why does it matter more than sex? Which is actually...
People don't say gender is meaningless. They say it's arbitrary. This is another very common fallacy from conservatives. When they hear that something is a social construct, what they actually interpret it as is it's meaningless and it doesn't exist. Social constructs exist. Money is a social construct. For Christ's sake, it exists still. It only means there's a degree of social arbitrariety, that through the social contract we've arrived at a collective understanding of the idea. This is a child's understanding of these ideas.
Actual real biology. And why is gender more real than biology itself? Why would anyone need to change his or her body in order to align with gender? A social construction.
They don't want to align with gender, they want different sexual characteristics.
When gender and sex are completely separate in the first place. Gender dysphoria, which is what we're talking about here, is a serious and tragic disorder. It is also extremely rare. According
Really?
to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual 5th edition, those who had received a diagnosis of gender identity disorder or transsexualism and were seeking hormone treatment and or surgery represented just 0.005 to 0.014% for males and 0.002 to 0.003% for...
Let's see, hold on. How many trans people in United States? How many trans people in the United States? Let's see. According to the Williams Institute at UCLA, about 0.58%. So, no. Now, let's see. How common is gender dysphoria? You'll notice that the question that was listed here was how many people have been diagnosed with gender identity disorder, which is now an outdated term, or transsexualism, which nobody uses anymore. These are, Vosh, YouTube is down. Then how is the site up? YouTube's fine. Otherwise, the website wouldn't be up. Moron. Anyway, when we're using outdated terminology like this, it makes me wonder the methodology. Do we just find like how many people have actually gone into clinics to get those diagnoses? And also, hold on, why do I even need to bite this bullet? Why does it matter? Even if there were only just a few people with gender dysphoria, of what issue would this be?
Surgery represented just 0.005 to 0.014% for males and 0.002 to 0.003% for females. Those stats are now rising dramatically.
We have that big announcement from an Oscar-nominated actor announcing he is transgender.
Hog.
Elliot Page came out publicly with a post about his identity.
And in that post, now liked nearly 2.5 million times. The more I hold myself close and fully embrace who I am, the more I dream, the more my heart grows, and the more I thrive. And guys, that's what we love to see.
Yes, he is going to help so many. Janae, thank you so much.
People suffering from gender dysphoria, which, in its non-politicized definition,
Non-politicized definition from Ben Shapiro.
means the persistent belief that you are a member of the opposite sex.
Is that... What does that mean, non-politicized? So if I Google the definition of gender dysphoria, it's going to be a different one than that. And that's because the definition I found is a political definition, right? So this is from psychiatry.org, citing from the DSM-5. Gender dysphoria is a concept designated as clinically significant distress or impairment related to a strong desire to be of another gender, which may include desire to change primary and or secondary sex characteristics. Not all transgender or gender diverse people experience dysphoria. But that's the politicized definition that's being cited from the DSM-5, the exact same document that he just got those statistics from. Oh, he misspelled persistent here. Nice.
Have a tragically high suicidal ideation and depression rate. That suicidal ideation rate remains tragically high after surgical and hormonal treatment.
No, it does not. See, this is what they're ultimately getting to. We haven't actually gotten any arguments in 8 minutes and 30 seconds, but this is ultimately what they land on every single time. And it's the idea that people who have gender dysphoria are sufferers of some tragic illness, and that the best way to help them would be to get them therapy so they can stop being trans or whatever. Unfortunately, the reason why a significant number, pretty much all of the reputable medical institutions in the developed world disagree with that perspective is because it factually doesn't work. Let me take a look at this meta-analysis that I have here. Hold on. This is called whatweknow.inequality.cornell.edu. It is an aggregate meta-analysis of existing literature on trans people and the validity of existing methods of transition. Is it helpful? Okay. Hold on. So there are a lot of studies linked here. A lot of studies linked here. Let's take a look at the summary, huh? Research findings. The scholarly literature makes clear that gender transition is effective in treating gender dysphoria and can significantly improve the well-being of transgender individuals. Among the positive outcomes of gender transition, put it in the research doc, it is in the research doc, and related medical treatments for trans individuals are improved quality of life, greater relationship satisfaction, higher self-esteem and confidence, and reductions in anxiety, depression, suicidality, and substance use. The positive impact of gender transition on transgender well-being has grown considerably in recent years, as both surgical techniques and social support have improved. Regrets following gender transition are extremely rare and have become even rarer as surgical techniques and social support have improved. Pooling data from numerous studies demonstrates a regret rate ranging from 0.3% to 3.8%. Regrets are most likely to result from a lack of social support after transition or poor surgical outcomes using older techniques. So they're not regretting transitioning, they're regretting the lack of social support or bemoaning the ineffective surgical techniques that we used to use. Factors that are predictive of success in the treatment of gender dysphoria include adequate preparation and mental health support prior to treatment, which is, I think, standard practice, proper follow-up care from knowledgeable providers, consistent family and social support, all things that Ben are fighting against, by the way, and high-quality surgical outcomes when surgery is involved. Transgender individuals, particularly those who cannot access treatment for gender dysphoria or who encounter unsupportive social environments, are more likely than the general population to experience health challenges, such as depression, anxiety, suicidality, and minority stress. While gender transition can mitigate these challenges, the health and well-being of trans people can be harmed by stigmatizing and discriminatory treatment. Ben. The inherent limitation in the field of trans health research is that it is difficult to conduct prospective studies or randomized controlled trials of treatments for gender dysphoria because of the individualized nature of the treatment, the varying and unequal circumstances of population members, the small size of the known trans population, and the ethical issues involved in withholding an effective treatment for those who need it. Trans outcomes research is still evolving and has been limited by the historical stigma against conducting research in the field. More research is needed to adequately characterize and address the needs of the transgender population. So, in summary, in concurrence with the overwhelming body of research on the subject, transitioning helps trans people. The only reason a person could not believe this is if they are lying to you deliberately, because the wealth of information on this subject is so substantial that you need to go out of your way to avoid it. When people like Ben Shapiro say this, they are lying deliberately. They are making the choice to tell information that they know will hurt people with gender dysphoria. They like to play up this big show of concern. You know, they're suffering, we need to help them, this just isn't the way to do it. That's not true. Because the thing that trans people need, people with gender dysphoria need, are a lack of social stigma, support from friends and family, and the availability of medical and psychological treatment, which Ben fights against on every level. He is the creator of the suicidality that he says is an example of transness being a mental illness. Well, him and other people, of course.
Longitudinal studies that are good just do not exist on the efficacy of these measures. And the
And what data do we have cited in your description, Ben? We have a 20% off code to your Daily Wire Debunked show. So you cite no studies, you mention no studies, you just allude to the research being... He's lying.
mental health problems associated with gender dysphoria remain extremely damaging, even in particularly accepting societies. But
much less so in accepting societies. And much, much, much less so if they get the gender treatment that they need.
Suffering from a mental disorder does not change your underlying sex, any more than believing that you are Napoleon Bonaparte makes you Napoleon Bonaparte.
Attack helicopter. Woo! Baby! Well, thankfully, most proponents of gender ideology, if that's what we're going to be calling it, do not believe that you can identify as long-dead historical figures, but you can identify as a gender. See, there's a difference there, because long-dead historical figures are one thing, and gender is another thing. Gender being a construct described by self-identification does not mean that all constructs are described by self-identification. Are you following? Does he... Can he hear me? Can everyone hear me? Just because you say gender is described by self-identification, this does not mean everything. You believe a man can be a woman? Then I'm a TA-1 Abrams 52 battle tank. Brrr! Okay. Wonderful commentary.
Transgender activists make an objective claim about reality based on subjective internal feelings. That's unsustainable.
Except the reality they're talking about, gender, is a social construct, so it's something that their subjective personal feelings actually have a quite a good deal of significance to.
What's more, transgender activists demand that you abandon reason, biology, privacy, even the ability to raise your kids.
Privacy? The ability to raise your... What the fuck are we talking about?
In concert with reality in favor of a delusional quasi-religious worldview in which gender and sex are completely segregated and...
Why does Ben have a problem with quasi-religious worldviews when he's a religious fundamentalist? Why is he talking himself down like that? Isn't that a little weird? You'll notice, by the way, that in this debunk of trans ideology, Ben is not explaining what exactly harm is being done by trans people, and he's also not explaining what they want you to do or use their pronouns. Is that it? Is that... Ben has already admitted that he'll use trans people's preferred pronouns when it's socially convenient to do so. He's already bitten the bullet that trans people are asking of the rest of you. And if you want, you don't have to call a trans woman she, her. She'll probably just dislike you. And so will I. That's free speech, baby. What are you, some kind of fucking commie? What are you, Ben? Some kind of fucking commie where everything you say has to be backed by the state, uncritically accepted by everyone around you? No. I support your freedom, Ben, to misgender trans people, and I support their freedom to hate you for it. That's America, baby.
A boy can be a girl and a girl a boy. Now, none of this means that anybody suffering from gender dysphoria ought to be mistreated.
Oh. So don't mistreat them, but misgender them, tell them they're delusional, they accept a quasi-religious worldview, deny them medical treatment, and legislate in government to discriminate against them.
Anybody with any sort of disorder ought to be treated with nothing but sympathy and care. But
this
does mean that a society that seeks to propagandize to children that they can switch
Wait, we're doing it. Ben, one argument at a time, Ben. These are drag queens. These aren't trans people. The Drag Time Story Hour were drag queens. These are guys in outfits. It's a costume they wear. But you don't know the difference, do you, Ben? And neither does your audience.
To propagandize to children that they can switch their gender is both lying to kids and doing them psychological harm in the process.
Unless you actually listen to a
Unfortunately,
scientist.
that's exactly what our society is now teaching kids in public schools. Anti-biological nonsense, including the lie that you might just be a different gender with different...
To be fair, Vosh, some drag queens are trans, I think. Yeah, but he was showing drag queens, not trans people. Trans people don't run around dressed like drag queens. It's a performance art. He was showing drag queens.
pronouns. And it's not just that. With the new Equality Act,
the motion is adopted.
The Biden administration and the Democratic Party are seeking to promote the idea that any institution that doesn't mimic these lies has to be destroyed.
Good.
Religious institutions are not exempted from federal regulations that demand that men...
Wait, I'm sorry. Does anything in the Equality Act mean that churches will be destroyed if they're transphobic?
who identify as women be treated as women. And this is true in sports, in restrooms. Ironically, feminists who sought to protect women from men have now seen female spaces completely destroyed.
Get fucked, TERFs. Ha! It's so funny. TERFs are mostly old second wave feminists. Ben Shapiro hates them too, but TERFs are so clouded by their hatred of trans people that they're willing to work with fascists who hate their rights too. It is so funny. By the way, keep in mind that no matter how much he cries about it, Ben Shapiro is losing. Arguably is already lost. Look at this. 62% of Americans support trans rights. Like, flat right there. Even 47% of Republicans say they're more... Oh, sorry, no, this is a change. More supportive since 5 years ago. The vast majority of people have gotten more supportive over time. Support for trans bathroom bill. Self-reported comfort with transgender people. All Americans. 63%. If they have a close friend, tell them they're trans. 56% if they learn that a local teacher in their elementary school is trans. 48% if they have their own child, tell them they're trans. So acceptance goes down the more, like, fear there is. Almost 3/4 of Democrats report being somewhat or very comfortable with a close friend telling them they're trans, compared to just over half for Republicans. Look, the problem is these numbers have changed significantly over time. They're getting like way better with time. And there's just no getting around it, you know. Ben Shapiro can put out as much propagandizing as he wants, as I'm sure it's going to make him a lot of money, but the tide has turned on this. It's just... It doesn't seem like we're going to backslide the way he wants us to.
Define female and male.
Oh, God, sorry, I accidentally muted.
We're now a society that demands that parents hand over their kids to the tender mercies of political actors masquerading as medical specialists. If you have a 12-year-old at school with a headache, the school nurse cannot prescribe to them Tylenol without calling you first. But we now have officials in states and in the federal government suggesting that if a 12-year-old says that she is a boy, the school should be able to prescribe puberty blockers without calling a parent.
No. What? Can I get a citation on that? Schools? Like, you go into the nurse's office? Like, 2 kids go in the nurse's office. One, like, got a scratched knee on the playground. They get a Band-Aid and some fucking antiseptic, and the other kid goes in, they're like, I'm uncomfortable with gender identity, and then the school nurse is just like, oh, I've got the thing, and they pull out some like highly expensive proprietary gender blocker, like prescription medication, like, here, take this before mommy gets here to pick you up. Like, what the fuck is he talking about? Again, really quick. No, okay, quickly, now get up on the bench. Now I will be flipping your genitalia around. What are we talking about? But guys, Ben Shapiro fans, come on, real? Can we, if this shit is actually such a threat, why make stuff up? Can I get a single example of a school nurse prescribing hormone blockers?
That is a sick society.
True.
In the end, a man claiming to be a woman is making an unsustainable claim. He can't even know what it is like to be a woman because he is not one. A man with surgeries and hormone treatment does not become a woman, nor does a man who simply declares himself a woman. All of this is insane propaganda that is being propagated for political purposes. So, no, a man cannot become a woman or a woman a man.
Ah, well, good thing trans women aren't men then. Okay, so yeah. This was supposed to be some kind of crazy debunk, but that was like really disappointing. A lot of it's recycled arguments which I expected, but imagine having the gall to describe a YouTube video as a debunk and not post a single citation or even list one in the video. Does anyone, Ben Shapiro fans, I genuinely need to know, like, do you think this is like the height of intellectual discourse? A debunk without citations? Not even mentioned. He just says like, and the evidence doesn't show transitioning helps trans people. Like, but nothing cited at all. There are even really bad methodology studies that he could cite there that would support his argument. The studies are bad and they're minorities in the overwhelming tide of studies that support my argument, but they exist. But no, because Ben Shapiro fans are very, very low IQ. Very low IQ. They like the aesthetic of intelligence, same as Jordan Peterson fans. They see a fast-talking guy who throws around words like logic and reason, and they are spellbound. They're enraptured by his words. But actual academic or intellectual engagement? No. They don't even know what that looks like, so Ben Shapiro doesn't have to try very hard. Consider this debunk. Debunked! That was funnier in my head. Tempest cut the segment.